All this comes from a single Russian military blog source, a source called the Kremlin Snuff Box of all things, which says, you're right, 20 people killed, of whom six North Koreans, three other North Koreans were wounded, it says.
Now, North Korean soldiers supporting the Russian invasion are reported to have been killed in occupied parts of Ukraine. A security official in the Ukrainian government has said that limited numbers of North Korean military personnel, mostly engineers, are overseeing the quality and use of the weapons which their country has provided to Russian forces, and that some of those North Koreans have already died. It comes after Western intelligence reports that North Korea is supplying half of the shells used by Russia in the war. That's about 3 million a year. Well, I've been speaking to John Everard, former British ambassador to North Korea, and I asked him what he made of those reports of North Korean soldiers who've been killed fighting in Ukraine.
When we say taking part, there's no evidence that they were actually engaged in combat. It's much more likely that they were either there to support technically the use of North Korean munitions in Ukraine, which of course the Russians have been using in very large quantities, or, according to one of the Russian blogs, that they were there on what the Russians call an experience exchange. That is to say that they were watching how the Russians prepare and launch an assault. Of course, North Korea, fearsome though it is, has not actually fought a war for a very long time, and its knowledge of how the modern battlefield works is way out of date.
We've been hearing for quite some time the suggestions that North Korea is providing some military equipment, missiles and so on to the Russians to help their battle in Ukraine. But it is a whole new dimension if they're actually sending North Korean personnel into the war zone.
Well, yes, if they are there just to support the equipment that, as you rightly say, North Korea has been supplying in large quantities. I think some of your colleagues in the Times newspaper were told by intelligence sources a few days ago that something like half of the shells used by Russia come from North Korea. If they were there to support that, that's frankly not particularly surprising. You'd expect that kind of support for that kind of massive munitions transfer. If we do find the North Koreans are actually involved in combat, that would be a game changer. But there's no real evidence of that yet.
The Times is reporting that local media, the Kyiv Post, saying that 6 North Koreans had been amongst 20 soldiers killed by a Ukrainian missile in the Russian-occupied Donetsk region. I mean, this would suggest that there was at least a small, if significant, number of North Korean personnel on the ground there.
All this comes from a single Russian military blog source, a source called the Kremlin Snuff Box of all things, which says, you're right, 20 people killed, of whom six North Koreans, three other North Koreans were wounded, it says. Okay, so we have 6 dead. That's sort of technical team stuff, not a massive infantry deployment.
And how significant do you think is the overall military support that North Korea is providing to Russia?
I think I've no reason to doubt the intelligence sources that briefed some of your colleagues that the support is very large indeed and is crucial to the Russian war effort. If indeed North Korea is supplying something like half of all the shells that Russia is using, so something like 3 million shells a year, that's a huge transfer of munitions and would make a very big difference on the battlefield.
North Korea is already almost completely isolated from the West, and there are many sanctions on it and so on. Would any evidence that North Korean personnel are actually fighting inside Ukraine, would that actually make much difference?
To be honest, no. I think the West has applied all the sanctions it can to North Korea. Clearly, if we found that they were actually fighting Ukrainians involved in combat, that would cause fury. But in terms of what you then do, how you actually respond, that's much more difficult. We're at full stretch already.
Why would North Korea want to get involved in this?
Why do you want to get involved? Well, Firstly, it gets battlefield experience. Secondly, this is a huge trade. It's one of the few bits of the North Koreans' decrepit economy that actually works, their ability to produce large quantities of munitions. And they're getting vital equipment back. I say equipment, they're getting oil, they're getting food back from the Russians. So that this is, from the North Korean perspective, this is crucial. If this relationship ever ends, and there's a real risk that when the Ukraine war does come to an end, that Russia will simply dump Ukraine, then Ukraine is left high and dry. So they're very eager for the time being to keep the relationship as warm as possible and to give the Russians pretty much everything they want.
John Everard, former British ambassador to North Korea, speaking to me just a little earlier this evening.
Я хочу вам подякувати особисто за Курську операцію. Всім і командирам, сержантам, всім солдатам, вашим побратимам передайте, будь ласка, від мене вдячність велику і привітання. Я знаю, що не просто в час довгої війни треба мотивувати особовий склад. Но я хочу, щоб ви знали, що мотивувати треба весь світ і переконувати, що українці можуть бути міцнішими за ворога, і воно так і є. І ця Курська операція, хочу, щоб ви знали, що дуже сильно допомогла мотивувати і тих, хто дає нам пакети підтримки зброєю за кордоном. Тому це була нова хвиля, вона дуже була важлива. Дякую. Вітаю. Дякую за службу.
Служу народові України.
Вітаю. Дякую за службу.
Служу народові України.
Дякую. Дякую за службу.
Служу народу України.
Дякую. Вітаю, Андрій. Дякую за службу.
Служу народу України.